This is Safety Bri, your number one safety geek. Why do we have the behaviors that we do? Superheroes in the workplace, right? All of those things that go into making you an effective safety manager. I love what we do. Motivation, learning, teaching, training, teamwork. I geek out over that just as much as I do safety. Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Safety Geek podcast. This is Safety Bri, and I hope this episode is coming to you where you are feeling good and you're doing exactly what you want to do, which I'm wondering what it is, right? I'm always curious as to what people are doing when they're listening to podcasts. So maybe this is coming to you on your lunch break, maybe your drive home, maybe your drive to work. I don't know. But whatever you're doing, I hope it is going well for you. So what we are talking about today is talking to management, talking to the people that we perceive as being higher than us or in better positions than us, those type of things, right? And I say we perceive because going back to my philosophy, I think everybody's equal. So anyway, but why are we talking about this? So we're talking about how to talk to management because in doing so, it is about building relationships. And one of the best things you can do as a safety manager is have really good relationships with everybody on your management team, as well as all your employees. It's how you build culture, is relationship building. So I also wanted to talk about this because I always find that people are scared. They're scared to talk to their head guy or girl at their location, their president, their GM, whatever they're called. I've talked to lots of people where they call their boss Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. And I've never done that. I've always been like, that's Joe. That's Judy, whatever, making up names here. Anyway, because that makes them more of an equal to me. So when you're calling somebody Mr., I don't know. Anyway, so another reason why I wanted to talk about this was that I also find people are not getting the results they want. They're talking to their bosses or their management team, but they're not getting the results they want. Or they are not given the opportunity to actually explain what they're wanting to do or the program or their problem or their issue. They're getting cut off, like they're given 15 minutes while other departments are given an hour. I've seen that too, like at staff meetings going around the table. They get to safety and they get like 5 minutes. They used to tease me. They used to say, Bri, you go first. So that way, we can get you out of the way. It was like crazy. And after about 5 minutes, they try to cut me off. And then HR would speak and they'd get 30 minutes, or whatever. So that could be an issue too. I was recently talking to a safety manager friend of mine, and one of the things his boss does is they get on the phone and he's like, I have a hard stop at such and such time. Well, when you have a hard stop, you're not going to be able to get in everything that you want to talk about, especially if you plan to have longer time. So I see that a lot too. And that comes down to just building relationships and making sure that you're opening up those communication channels. So I wanted to give you some clear steps on how to do that. But before we get started, let's go over the org chart at your organization, because that really determines a lot of this, right? Is what does your org chart look like? Who are you reporting to? So safety should always, there's no exception to this. They should always be reporting to the highest level at the facility. So that would be your general manager, your president, whatever it is, whatever it's called at your facility. They should never, ever report to operations or any part of operations. I saw a safety department one time report to maintenance, and then maintenance reported to operations. So the reason why you don't want safety reporting to operations is going back to where safety is your objective observer. They're the auditor. They're the ones that are telling people what they're doing wrong. You can't have them telling their bosses that, right? They're not going to get the same impact. So you can say to your boss, hey, they're doing this wrong. They're not, following this procedure. And the boss could just say, yeah, we don't care. We're not going to follow it anyway. And then it doesn't go up further the chain So the highest level of that organization never even knows that you are possibly breaking a regulation or a law or putting employees at risk because you're stumped because you can't go higher than operations. So that's why safety should always report to the highest level of the organization. In fact, I've left companies because of that. The minute that they change it to where safety doesn't report to the highest level, I'm out the door, because that just shows me they don't have a commitment to safety. Now, there was a period where I saw a lot of safety managers reporting to HR. I don't think that works either, because you still have a buffer then between you and the highest level. But I do think that safety and HR should be working as a team, right? And I used to say, HR should report to safety, not the other way around. Because remember, safety affects every department, but every department doesn't necessarily affect safety. So that's why I was like, no, safety, HR should report to safety. And maybe I was just so used to having my higher fire authority that I was like, yeah, this is the way it should be. Because that's the way it worked, was that I got the stuff before HR did, and then I sent it on to HR. So it just worked out that way. But they should be a team. And I've also seen where HR does safety in smaller organizations. And that kind of makes sense to me too. But then HR reports to the highest level of the organization. So if they're doing safety too, then you still have safety reporting to the highest level. So if that's not what's going on at your organization, if you're reporting to somebody who you really shouldn't be reporting to, it's just going to make your job more difficult. So just go into it knowing your job's going to be more difficult. You're never going to have that world-class safety program. You're always going to have struggles. All right. But there are ways to fix that by communication and relationships and getting those in charge to understand why it's so important that safety reports to the highest level. So anyway, so it's about fostering those relationships and teamwork and inclusion with the management team. That's why you want to make sure that you have a good communication channels. When you have good relationships with your management team, the conversations are easier. You get better communication of ideas. You get a lot of give and take. You get a lot more compromise. You get your stuff done. So that's why it's important that you understand the steps to properly talk to management. There are ways to do it that make you more successful than other ways. Right? So why do we even have to talk to the management team? Why can't we just do our job and not even talk to them, right? That would be great. But no, it's to build those relationships. But there are things that we actually have to communicate with them on a regular basis. So that could be like just safety department updates, could be staff meetings, could be asking for approval on your projects, getting the money and the resources to do what you want to do. Executive advisory committees, those are always key to have, and speaking on them. Maybe you have to speak to a board of directors. I had a job where I actually had to report to a board of directors every month and speak at the board meetings. So that was scary in the beginning because it was like 100 board members. And then you have to talk to supervisors because remember, you're the coach of the coaches. So you have to build those relationships and know how to talk to the supervisors. Just understand that when you're talking to people, especially in management, every interaction is probably going to have a different approach. Meaning that, excuse me, you can't talk to the supervisors the same way that you may talk to, let's say, the board of directors or vice versa. You're going to have different speech patterns. You're going to have different areas. So you have to learn to tailor your approach that meets who you're talking to. Because you're not going to approach a staff meeting where you're talking to everybody on the team the same way that you approach an executive advisory committee where you're just talking to the top level people on the management team. So you have to make sure that you're tailoring your speech, your selling point, your focus point, and even your appearance based on the person that you're talking to. All right, so let's get into this. So step one is to know, how does this person I'm talking to give information? How are they communicating to me and to other people? And if you don't recognize this, maybe if they have a secretary or an assistant, you can ask them, how do they prefer to get communication? It could be, really short and to the point. It could be chatty, like they're talking about family or friends and all of that, and then eventually they get to work. It could be over charts versus lines of data. Like, how do they like to receive their communication? Maybe they prefer having meetings with everybody all at once, or they prefer having one-on-one meetings. So the key is that you want to approach them and give them information in the way that they like to receive it. And the way that they like to receive the information is generally the same way that they give information. So we're not asking them to change their communication style. We are going to change ours so that it mirrors theirs. And what does this do? This makes it so that they can connect with you better. They will pay more attention to what you're saying. They will be less distracted, right? So if you give them a document full of lines of data when they prefer charts and you're trying to talk to them about it, they're distracted by the fact that they have this thought of not wanting to have this lines of data. Why didn't he just put this in a chart? Right? So it's important that you give it to the way they receive, so that way they get less distracted. And keep in mind that whoever you're talking to, they may value safety. It may actually be a core value of theirs. But you have to understand that it's not the only thing on their plate. It's the only thing on your plate, but it is not the only thing on their plate. This is one element that is on their plate. So they may support you, but you have to understand that they're juggling a lot of different balls, and they don't want any of them to fall and break. Okay, so they're trying to figure out a way to support you. And sometimes you just have to tell them what you need from them. Very clear and concise. But step one is making sure that you're giving them the information in the way that they like to receive information. So that way you have a connection in your communication style. Step two, know what their goals are. Their goals are going to be different than your goals. All right. So me as a safety manager, my goal is always to reduce injuries and get people to be safe and to learn about safety, so that way they're even safe at home, right? So if I'm teaching somebody ladder safety in the workplace, I want to know that when they go home and hang up their Christmas lights, they're still practicing ladder safety. That is my goal. And my goal is also to treat everybody in the workplace with respect. That is my goal. Safety is not necessarily the only goal that this person you're speaking to, this member of management, has as well. They may have safety as one of their goals because it could be a company goal, right? So you can have a company goal to reduce your safety numbers. But as a member of management, it's probably just part of their goal. It might only be a 15% part of their goal, right? So it's a very small part. The part of them is like, I'm okay giving away that part of my bonus, So it's up to you to build that relationship so that way they understand why what you do affects all of their goals, right? So you have to understand what their goals are. And generally with supervisors, their goals are going to be productivity related. So anything I try to talk to them about, I try to relate it to productivity, okay, or efficiency. For managers, it's usually expense related, right? So they want to keep their expenses low and keep their productivity high. So I might talk to them about expenses and productivity. And for executives, theirs are going to be profit, right? So we may be looking at people and being more concerned with people. Unfortunately, it's not that our executives don't care about the people, but they're measured on their profit. So when you're wanting to do something, you have to sell it in terms of how it's going to help them meet their profit goals. So you have to craft that message that's going to match the audience that you're trying to sell it to. It's getting them to understand their why in the message. So why would they want to spend $50,000 on electronic onboard recorders for forklifts, or something like that? So you have to be able to understand how doing that meets a productivity goal, meets an expense goal, meets a profit goal, as well as reducing injuries. And then depending on who you're talking to, you emphasize whichever one is most important to them. So Know what everybody's goals are. So generally, every year, organizations will set goals. If you're in a smaller company and you don't set goals, then I'd start doing it. I'd start talking about, I would start asking them what's most important to them. I'd go to the management team and say, what's most important to you? And even if it's not a set goal for the company, it's a goal to them. So that way you at least know what's important to everybody. And then when you're communicating with them, you can craft your message to match that, and it'll get them more buy-in. They'll have more buy-in for what it is you're selling. All right? So that's step 2. Know what their goals are and craft your message around their goal. Step 3. This is a tough one, and I only learned this one within the last couple of years, but oh my gosh, it's a good one. Step 3 is dress the part when possible. I know what you're thinking. You're like, what? What do you mean? Like my clothes? I totally mean your clothes. Totally mean your clothes. So this may mean keeping a change of clothes in your office or a change of shoes. So this is what I want you to think about. Let's say that you're about to present this project that is going to save the company money to a table of executives who are all wearing suits. And you walk in because you work in the real world in jeans and safety boots, maybe a button-down shirt and a safety vest, probably sweaty from working all day, right? You had this meeting at 3 p.m. What's that going to look like, right? And vice versa. Let's say that you were wearing a suit and you go to talk to a group of employees that are all in their work gear. Do you really think that they're going to think that you understand them? So unfortunately, this is the world that we live in, is that your appearance does matter. So if you're in a room with executives or board members, you want to make sure that you're dressing exactly like them. This goes back to that back to what I said about mirroring them. You want to mirror their communication style. You also want to mirror their appearance. So if you walk in boots and a safety vest and jeans, you're not mirroring their appearance. Yes, they do have a basic understanding that you're coming from work, but everybody, every human being on this planet has implicit biases. And what implicit bias means is that you have a bias in your brain that you cannot control because it's implicit. You cannot control it. It's because of the culture that you were raised in, the society you were raised in, the bombardment of the media, right? You cannot control these things. But you have this bias, and a bias is not a prejudice. It's not discrimination. It's not racism. It's just a bias that you can't control, that you're going to automatically have. So this implicit bias comes into play with appearance. Unfortunately, it's absolutely horrible. That's true. So unless this person you're talking to is aware of their implicit bias and fights against it, there's going to be a little bit of bias against you. So they've done studies of people that dress differently, and the reception, whether or not the group, what their reception of that person was, they would study them on whether they thought the person was intelligent, knew what they were talking about, or good at their job, those type of things, based on their appearance. So this is an easy thing to actually change when you're trying to, build those relationships in management, that if you show up to the advisory committee with a table full of people in suits and you're wearing not necessarily a suit, but maybe dress pants and dress shoes and a dress shirt, as opposed to jeans and work boots, it's going to come across better. You're going to be able to make an easier connection with those people, And I'm sorry that this is the way it is. And you can actually look up implicit bias if you want to. I'll put a link in the show notes to the Harvard study where you can actually take many different implicit bias tests and discover your own biases. Because being aware of your own biases is actually very, very good to have. Because once you're aware of them, then you can fight them. So here's a story I want to tell you about. And I'm going down a psychology wormhole, so I apologize. This is one of the things I learned in studying psychology that angered me And unfortunately, it's a truth. So many years ago, I went to a water park. We're talking, oh my gosh, probably 7-8 years ago. I went to a water park, and one of the things I noticed at the water park is that almost everybody, I mean, it was the highest percentage I had ever seen, had tattoos. It was just like it was weird to see somebody without a tattoo at this water park. It's very popular because I live in Florida. So it was a theme park one, so lots and lots of people there. And I have tattoos, so don't think I'm biased against tattoos. I have 3 of them myself. But that showed me that tattoos are extremely common, right? That there are more people with tattoos than without. However, in my studies in psychology, they studied people's biases against tattoos or towards tattoos. And it showed that there is a belief that people with tattoos are not as intelligent as people without, as well as other things, right? And this saddened me because we know that whatever's on your skin does not affect your brain. But unfortunately, it's all this implicit bias. It's something that they can't control. So that's how appearance comes into play, is that it also falls under this implicit bias. Okay, I know I went on a wormhole there. I'm just gonna get off of it because it was just craziness. All right, step 4, language. So the words or expressions that you use can also mirror that person. So pay attention to, like, if you're trying to talk to a member of the executive management team or the management team, what words and expressions do they use? Learn them yourself. I'm not saying that you need to change your communication style, but using common words and phrases helps strengthen a relationship between people because they then see, hey, they're just like me, right? And a stronger relationship means easier communication between the two of you, easier team atmosphere, more support. You will actually have an easier time getting your job done when you have these relationships built. This is one way to do that. Now, another psychology wormhole, that I want to tell you about is that there is some gender bias in language as well. So when a man is talking to a man, or a woman is talking to a woman, direct language is better received than an uncertain or questioning language. So what I mean by that is direct language would be something like a person saying, we need to do this, as opposed to a person saying, I think we should try this. There's 2 different styles there. We need to do it, or I think we should try. So when a man is talking to a man, the direct language is better received. A woman talking to a woman, direct language is better received. However, when you are talking to the opposite sex, the uncertain questioning language is better received. I don't know why. I can't explain it. There are some pretty nasty sounding theories out there, and I'm not going to get into that. But just understand that there's been lots of studies on that as well, and that is the results. Just keep in mind that these things I'm telling you about the implicit bias and about the appearance and about the language is that these are not case-by-case studies. You can never do like this one person and how it happens. It's about a big, large sample population. So it's not that it's going to hold true on every single case, but in a large sample population, it holds true a significant amount of time. So if you're having a hard time communicating with a certain member of management and you can't figure it out, maybe consider your appearance or consider the words you're using or the type of language you're using, whether it's direct or it's questioning. Change it up and see if things change. Just know that is part of building relationships and talking to management as well. Now, what do you do with all of this information? I'm telling you how you talk to somebody one-on-one. What do you do when you're in a meeting and you have a whole mix of people that you're having to talk to, right? That kind of gets tough because I can't talk direct one way and then, indirect another, or I might be in a room of half operations, half executives, half in suits, half in work clothes. What do I do? Right? Those type of things. So what I say is you need to ask yourself, who is the most important group that I need to win over on what I'm talking about? Does what I'm talking about apply more to the operations team, or does it apply more to the executive team, the board of directors, whatever, right? And then tailor your approach to whatever that group is, because it's the most important is who you win over. And if you're stuck and don't know who, I always go for the top, right? Go to the highest level, because if you can win over the highest level, you pretty much got it. Or you can combine your style, right? Every meeting do differently, or just combine something there. Just understand that you need to have the one-on-ones to build a relationship, and it'll make the group meetings a little bit better. So you need to be always building relationships, and from the words of Dale Carnegie, you need to win friends and influence people. If you have not read that book, it is a must. It is a must. It's old. It's a short read. Definitely read that book. But it teaches you how to build relationships and how to build trust and how to influence people as well, which is kind of what we want to do as safety managers. And some of the key points there is that you want to compliment people. You want to ask them questions about themselves, things that they're interested in. And you want to listen. Oh, active listening is so important. And you let them talk about themselves. That's how you build relationships. Let them talk about themselves. And you don't ever talk about yourself unless you are directly asked. And what you will notice when you start doing this is people love talking about themselves and they could care less about you. It's crazy. It is crazy. I was recently talking to someone that I hadn't seen in 8 or 9 months, and I was with them for 2 hours, and not once did they ask one question about me. It was all talking about them. You'll notice people love to talk about themselves. So it might be annoying at first, but know that by you asking these questions and actually listening to them talk and making comments about what they're saying, you're building that relationship between them. And the last thing I want to leave you with is a tip that I'm not sure where I got this from. I've been in so many classes and stuff lately. I'm not really sure, but I know it was a safety manager. And I'm not sure if it was a comment on a post or if it was a comment in a class, but this is what he said he did. And I absolutely love this. And I think y'all should do this. Every Monday morning, he blocks off 2 hours. First thing in the morning, he does nothing Monday morning for those first 2 hours. And he gets his cup of coffee and he walks around to every member of management and he talks to them one-on-one and asks them how their weekend was and how their family's doing. And he goes around his entire organization and he does that. Every manager, every supervisor, every executive, every Monday morning with his cup of coffee. And that's how he's building relationships. That's how he's getting teamwork. It is an amazing idea and it only takes a couple hours. And it is so worth your time because if you have those relationships, it's going to make your job so much easier. And I'm also thinking that when you're doing these conversations anyway, you already know what they're going to be wanting and expecting from you during the week, right? So you're just starting off your week right. So, alrighty, guys, that is what I have for you. I hope you enjoyed my rambling conversation about how to build relationships with your management team. Sorry, I went off on some tangents there. I told you I geek out over psychology as much as I do safety. So I will talk to you on the next episode. And in the meantime, no matter what you're doing right now, have a safe drive, have a great run, enjoy your lunch, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Check out the show notes and links for this week's show at www.asksafetygeek.com. Hey, did you know that there's an Ask Safety Geek Facebook group? You can find it on the Safety Geek page at facebook.com/Ask Safety Geek. Be sure to join the group where we share safety manager stories and best tips and tricks within the community. Thanks for listening and have a safe day. Talk to you soon.